Serious questions are being raised around the world about the fallout from the sweeping attacks on Iran by the United States and Israel. During an emergency meeting of the United Nations Security Council yesterday afternoon, there were tense verbal clashes between Iran and the United States and Israel. And several countries, along with UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, called for a halt to the hostilities and a return to negotiations.
Military action carries the risk of igniting a chain of events that no one can control in the most volatile region of the world. Let me be clear. There is no viable alternative to the peaceful settlement of international disputes. I deeply regret that this opportunity of diplomacy has been squandered. The region and the world need a way out now. I call for de-escalation and an immediate cessation of hostilities. The alternative is a potential wider conflict with grave consequences for civilians and regional stability.
Joining us now, U.S. National Editor of the Financial Times, Ed Luce, and Tara Kangarloo, adjunct professor at Georgetown University, global affairs journalist, and author of The Heartbeat of Iran. Thank you both very much for coming to the weekend. Tara, let me start with you. What happens in Iran now that the supreme leader is dead?
Thank you so much. That is indeed a big question. But what I can tell you, having covered Iran for more than 15 years, is that millions of ordinary Iranians this morning woke up to a news that the majority of them wanted. Ali Khamenei, for more than 30 years, has held an iron fist, an iron grip over the country. Many people see him as the sole figure that's responsible for the oppression, repression, and isolation of the country. And in the words of people who have been speaking with in Iran, in Tehran and other cities, they think that this is a new chapter in Iran's history. They don't know what the next chapter looks like, but they certainly believe that this is a turning point. And I really want to underscore how the majority of the people in this country of 90 million coming out of the brutal crackdown against protesters that we saw earlier in January no longer want the regime as it stands and want to move beyond the Islamic regime. So many in Iran are celebrating. And of course, the Islamic regime has its supporters, some ideologically charged, but also we have to understand that the IRGC and the regime controls much of Iran's economy, the entirety of the country's infrastructure, and much of it has to come down to who will take helm of that and who will take power. Last thing I would say is that we can all confirm, really, and agree that the country has been hit within its leadership, its intelligence apparatus, and also its military. So perhaps an extremely weak point for a regime where the leadership is trying to scramble as to what comes next.
Ed Luce, I want to play for you Mike Waltz. He is a U.S. ambassador to the United Nations at the UN Security Council yesterday, and get your reaction on the other side.
The safety of our allies is not conditional. It is assured. The bottom line is this, colleagues. Our allies and partners can count on the United States and can count on President Trump. Colleagues, peace is not preserved by appeasing those who threaten it. Peace is preserved through strength in the face of terror. History has taught us that the cost of inaction is far greater than the burden of decisive action. And our president, President Trump, has taken that decisive action.
The safety of our allies is not conditional, it is assured. Many of our allies have been in the Gulf, have been hit by Iran, whether it's in Dubai or Kuwait, Bahrain. When you see that and you hear this promise from Mike Waltz, do those two things square?
So, I mean, it's quite a sweeping promise that Ambassador Waltz made there. And if you look at a map, I was in the Gulf a couple of weeks ago, in fact. Cities like Doha and Dubai and Kuwait City, very close, very vulnerable. Iran has got a line in these Shahed drones. So it's not just missiles. Drones are harder, well, cheaper to produce and harder to stop because they can fly below the radar. And we have seen some iconic buildings hit in Dubai and elsewhere. So it's quite a promise the United States is making. It has a naval base, of course, that hosts the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain, and it has that air base in Qatar. And so there are capabilities to protect American assets, but covering the whole of the Gulf is a pretty tall order, given the capability and nature of drones, and the fact that Iran clearly sees these Gulf allies of the United States as the soft underbelly. We are going to see a lot more of these missiles targeting these city-states, these sheikdoms across the Gulf in the coming days, I fear, and there are going to be missiles and drones that will get through.
And Tara, I want to go back to you and just ask you about, I know you have many sources in the region. You have been covering this for a very long time. What are you hearing from friends, sources, people on the ground right now from a personal perspective, really?
I think on a personal perspective, I will tell you, as an Iranian woman, I remember my father always in Iran. He was a doctor. He would always say, would I live long to see the supreme leader dead? And again, I really want us to grasp the gravity and the importance of this moment for ordinary Iranians who've been living under this dictatorship. But professionally, as a journalist, the sources that you mentioned, I spoke to a diplomat in Saudi Arabia, and he told me that what comes next is unclear because we don't know the policy and the method of which the United States want to achieve that goal. And I think that's important. And also sources in Iran, mainly journalists who are covering this in the field, are telling me that one of the reasons Iran is doubling down on its aggression toward its neighboring countries and the Gulf, specifically the UAE, is that possibly that might pressure them to then pressure the United States and Israel to back off. And that's, I think, something that's interesting to look at. And I believe we're getting lines that possibly the CIA knew the whereabouts of the supreme leader, and they gave that information to Israel. But Jackie, one of the things that we should closely look at is the reaction of Iran's proxies in the region. I spent many years in Lebanon, and speaking with sources there, they're telling me that Hezbollah is oddly quiet. Obviously, their biggest backer is Iran. The supreme leader has vehemently backed Hezbollah, but they are taking a very cautious line because they are certainly in deep trouble there. And also Iraq, Iran's paramilitary supporters there are sort of standing by. So we have to look at these forces, Iran's proxies in the region, carefully. Tonight, we are getting information that pro-supreme leader memorials are going to be held across Iran. A lot is unfolding, but certainly it's a momentous day for many in Iran who wanted this man gone.
And Rick, quickly, the economic impact of what's happening in the Gulf and the strikes in Iran. We're about to find out when the markets open again Monday morning. A report in CNBC with the headline, How the Attack on Iran Could Impact the Global Oil Market and Economy. It says traders are underestimating the threat that Iranian retaliation to the U.S. attack poses to the market. Crude oil future prices will likely rise by $5 to $7 per barrel when trading opens at 6 p.m. Eastern Time Sunday, as the market prices in some risk, he said. Can you talk real quickly about the economic impact of what we've been seeing for more than 24 hours now?
So tankers are avoiding the Strait of Hormuz, which about a quarter of the world's oil shipments go through that strait. And clearly it's very dangerous with all these drones and missiles flying around. There are also container freight companies that are now avoiding the Suez Canal because that is within Iran's range, and that's going to, both of those are going to feed into higher oil prices. But the question here isn't what the blip will be on Monday or Tuesday. Doubtless there is going to be a rise in crude. It's a question of how long this goes on for. And I mean, if we look at previous wars of intervention, regime change in the Middle East, Iraq and Libya, one with US boots on the ground, one without US boots on the ground, first resulting in the death of Saddam Hussein, the second, after the trial, the second on the streets of Gaddafi. The prospect of prolonged chaos here and an instability inside Iran spilling over more broadly, that's a reasonably high risk. And so that I think would suggest, if you're peering through your economic crystal ball, that we've got far sort of higher risks to global energy supplies and energy prices in the weeks ahead.
Ed Luce, Tara Kangerloo, thank you both for joining us as we continue to follow this breaking news out of Iran.